So we are going to continue our first chapter of history, explorations and discoveries, page number 3, last heading. It was an age of explorations and discoveries in different walks of life. So it is talking about the time when Renaissance was taking place, Reformation also was taking place at that time. The Renaissance movement infused a desire to know the unknown. So because of Renaissance, people were started to question about various things rather than believing things blindly. There were various discoveries made by different explorers, sailors, and scientists. Now the question arises as what were the causes for undertaking these explorations. So there were so many discoveries were made, so many inventions were also made there during this time. So what was the main cause of those things? The most important cause was the rise of capitalism. What is capitalism? Capitalism means uh, to own economic conditions of a country by few private owners for their personal profit, for their personal gain, as it greatly helped in accumulating more wealth. People began to add to their wealth by investing in the expeditions to newly discovered lands. So it was increasing their wealth when they were exploring new places. The European rulers' greed for gold and silver and the desire of the European people for spices and goods of foreign countries greatly helped to promote voyages of exploration. So their greed for gold and silver, because they wanted to explore new places and own the silver and gold mines of those places, and also they were they were also lacking the spices of the Asian and African countries. So all these things influence them to start explore those new places. Apart from spices, the Europeans also bought textiles, indigo, sugar, coffee, tea, and saltpeter, silk from China, and cotton textile from India. So all these things they were getting from India and China, mainly from Asian countries. Were other popular items. The Arab traders carried these goods via the Strait of Constantinople and sold them to Italian merchants. The merchants of Genoa and especially Venice became rich and powerful. In 1488 CE, Bartholomew Diaz, a Portuguese explorer, sailed down the west coast of Africa and came as far as the southern tip of Africa, the Cape of Good Hope. In 1498, C. Vasco da Gama reaches Calicut on the west coast of India. Okay, so Vasco da Gama in 1498 came to India. Calicut means place near West Bengal. He returned home with spices and precious stones. In 1492, Christopher Columbus, an Italian with 90 men in 3 ships, he found some island he believed were the East Indies. So when Christopher Columbus reached America, he thought that it was India. Of that was presumed to be the Asian mainland. So he was thinking that it was the Asian mainland. What he had really discovered was a continent soon to be known as America by Europeans, but it was actually America, which was later known by the people that it was America. In 1497 CE, Amerigo Vespucci explored Venezuela. The use of his name for the continent of America arose through mistake. So Amerigo Vespucci. So because of his name, America got its name. In 1519 CE, Magellan, another Portuguese, sailed around the world. He went around the tip of South America, which is named after him, the Straits of Magellan. So, Strait of Magellan was the name after the Portuguese sailor Magellan. He called the new ocean that he entered the Pacific because it appeared calm. Magellan was killed in Philippines. So, Pacific Ocean was the name given by Magellan. These discoveries changed man's idea of the world and gave impetus to trade. So when they discovered these new lands, these new routes, so this inspired them to trade on these new places. Geographical discoveries led to colonialism. Colonialism means when another country uh, own another or capture another country. So colonialism is the policy followed by one nation to acquire control over another country and exploit it economically. So main reason of colonialism is to exploit another country, to own it and exploit it economically using its economic resources. The Portuguese, the Dutch, French and English, these four main powers started establishing colonies in Asia and Africa and America. The geographical knowledge and scientific methods were now applied because of the discovery of new lands and development of trades. So, they were using scientific methods and geographical knowledge. For example, the maps were revised, new techniques and instruments were used which helped in improving the knowledge of navigation. The mariner's compass was used which reduced the danger of ship being lost in the sea. So, for their navigation through sea routes, they started to use mariner's compass, which was very useful to track their way through the seas. The Arabs used astrolabe and quadrant. Astrolabe was the instrument which was used to determine latitude. Okay, and the quadrant was the instrument to determine angular measurements, angles between places, used which reduce the danger of ship being lost so these were the instruments they were using through their sea journey. The European sailors used these to find the direction of high areas by relying on the position of stars. Invention of gunpowder largely helped to guard against piracy and to fight enemies at sea. And the gunpowder was also the important discovery and important invention of this time. Reformation and counter-reformation. So what was the Reformation? Actually, at that time, the church was becoming very corrupt. Very corrupt practices were performed in the church. But at that time, people were as they were getting knowledge, new discoveries were also made over there. So, Reformation also took place in the religious things. So the growth of ideas and development of scientific spirit during the period of Renaissance influenced the attitude of people toward religion. So it also influenced their religious belief. The thinkers questioned the right of the church to control the life of the people. They criticized the corrupt practices prevailing in the church. Erasmus and John Wycliffe clearly exposed the abuses of the church. So people were now started to question on the power of the church. In the 16th century, a movement was launched to clean the church from its evils. So in 16th century, the movement was launched for reformation in the churches. This movement was called Reformation. The church did not pay heed to these reforms, and as a result, the reformers protested and established their own church called Protestant Church. So it was this was the reason of the formation of the Protestant Church. Martin Luther, a German. So remember this name. This is very important name. Okay, a German was the founder of the Protestant Reformation. His deep concern for religion forced him to enter a monastery. Here he was declared a heretic and an outlaw, but escaped death because he was supported by ruler of Germany and other wealthy merchants. So at that time, when anyone having his views against the church or the religious beliefs of those time, so at that time it was a crime. Okay, it was considered as a crime, and the punishment would be the life sentence for this. But Martin Luther escaped the kings, and big merchants were supporting him. This movement then spread to England, Holland, Denmark, Germany, Switzerland, and various other countries. The ruler and people of Europe got divided into Protestants and the Roman Catholic and indulged in religious wars. So, because of this Reformation movement, European people were divided in Protestants and Roman Catholic. Counter-Reformation. The Reformation failed to destroy the Roman Catholic Church. So this Reformation failed to destroy the Roman Catholic Church. Now the Pope, the priests, the Catholic rulers and others took various measures to introduce reforms in the Catholic Church. So now the Pope and priest of the Roman Catholic Church started to make some reformations in their religious practices and the power of the churches. The period in which the Catholic Church officials attempted reform and worked to bring back to the church some of its lost popularity is known as the Counter-Reformation. So what they did to regain the lost popularity of the Roman Catholic Church, so it was known as a Counter-Reformation. Industrial Revolution. More than 200 years ago, changes took place in industry that transformed society and altered the way goods were made. The changes, which began in Britain about 1760, are known as the Industrial Revolution. So this was the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution began in England because it had a stable government and surplus capital, which was invested in new industries. So the main reason of the Industrial Revolution began in England was it had a stable government and surplus capital. Consolidation of land holdings by rich landlords and mechanization of agriculture forced the small landless farmers to migrate to towns and cities in search of employment in factories. Coal and iron, two essential resources, were available in abundance in England. So because of the inventions of the machines, people started using machines in their agriculture work in their farms. So because of this, the landless farmers became jobless and they had to move to the towns for the job. So it also helped in the growth of the industrialization in England. And in England, coal and iron was in a huge amount. So it was also a factor for Industrial Revolution in England. The mechanical inventions made tremendous differences in methods of production. In 1738, John Kay made the flying shuttle for cloth weaving, and James Hargreaves invented the spinning jenny in 1764. A spinning jenny was a machine where more than one thread was made. So a spinning jenny machine which enabled one person to spin 8 threads simultaneously. Okay, and James Hargreaves named his machine after his wife. So his wife was Jenny. So use of water power and later steam power in cotton industry led to the growth of cotton mills and factories. The next industry to take to the new methods was the woolen industry. In 1765, James Watt, everyone know him, James Watt, made his steam engine. The use of coal led to new methods of iron smelting. Iron smelting is the process to extracting iron from its ore, and fast development of iron industry. George Stephenson, steam locomotive. John McAdams, road building technique. Thomas Edison's incandescent light bulb. Graham Bell's telephone and Marconi's telegraph led to better transport and communication. So these inventions also were made during the that time, and it increased the speed of industrial revolution, because it helped the in transportation and telecommunication. Revolution in transport was stimulated by the need to move raw materials and finished goods cheaply and quickly. Thus, three great industries grew up in England: textile, iron, and coal. So remember these three names. Textile, iron, and coal were the three industries which grew in England. The face of England changed. Instead of the green and pleasant countryside, new manufacturing units came up. Agriculture suffered and unemployment increased. So because of the industrialization and using of the machines, unemployment increased in England. As each new invention came, it resulted in replacing manual labor by mechanical devices. This often led to workers being discharged and caused great resentment among them. The new factories swallowed up many of the cottage industries and the private workers. So new factories where people using machines were used to produce goods, they destroyed the cottage industries. It was not possible for these house workers to compete with the machines, so they had to give up their old crafts and trades and took employment as wage earners. So the people who are working in the cottage industries, they left their work and started to work as a wage laborers in those factories. The gulf between the employers and workers of the factories became wider. The employers showed them little pity and made them work in stifle, unhealthy places for long hours. So because of the industrial revolution, so owners of those factories and industries, they started to exploit their workers. So because of this exploitation, a new class, the capitalist, these owners were also known as capitalists, private owners of countries, trade and industry emerged in the society. The development a new philosophy which is called laissez-faire or free trade without any interference from the government. The industrial revolution and capitalism solved the problem of production. However, they did not solve the problem of distribution of the new wealth created. So the old tussle between the have and have nots not only remained but became more acute. The workers organized themselves in trade unions to fight for their fights and better working conditions and faced strong resistance from the employers. So the workers, to improve their working conditions and to get another rights, they form a trade union, and this started a struggle between employers and employee. Imperialism. The great voyages of exploration, discoveries of new routes and new lands led to a steady growth of trade and commerce. Trading companies were established and they set up trading posts in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Eventually, various European powers, the Dutch, Spanish, Portuguese, French, and English, conquered these territories and established colonies. So, these powerful European powers, they acquired their colonies in Africa and Asia. Capitalism led inevitably to new imperialism, for everywhere there was a demand for new material and markets for manufactured goods. So because of the industrial revolution, in those European countries which were growing as a where the industries were growing, so they need raw materials for their industries and the market for their product. This led them to compete for their colonies. So the easiest way to have markets and the raw materials was to take possession on country. So they started to acquire the new places in Asia and Africa, establish their colonies for their raw materials and their products and the market for their products. So there was a wild scramble among the more powerful countries for new territories. So struggle began. England again, with her possessions in India and her sea power, had a great advantage. By the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, Germany, Italy, and Russia also joined the race for more overseas possessions. So new powers like Germany, Russia, Italy, they also in this war of colonization. Asia and Africa were already divided among various European powers. So they made their colonies in Asia and Africa. Germany was a later comer, but therefore was desperate to find a foothold in these areas. This led to intense rivalry among the European powers. Germany dreamt of a world empire and a place in the sun, and therefore was determined to overtake its rivals. Thus, a naval and armament race began. So everyone was increasing their power, and which also led to the First World War. Because of the tension in these colonies, it prepared a ground for First World War. So today we have completed our first chapter of history.